Chapter 34. Purification, the Rainbow's End. Slick awoke naked but warm. For the first time in years, his skin felt tender, it was clean. His head felt so heavy and thick that he could feel every beat of his heart throbbing against his forehead. His ankles and wrists were painfully bound together. The bindings bit hard into his skin. He was gagged. Each time his mind began to clear, pain pulled the fog back in. When he opened his eyes, the world was upside down. A golden glow lit coarse rock walls that curved around him. In front of him were symbols that he did not recognize. They were stacked on top of each other as far as he could see up the curved rock wall. Out of the corner of his eye to his right, there was a vertical wooden 4x4 post. The same to the left. He figured that he was hanging from a wooden frame. He wrenched his head as far as he could to the left. He gasped. His mind emptied and terror entered. Next to him hung a pale, naked woman. How long she had been hanging there, he did not know. She was bound the same way he was. Sticking out of a small slit in her neck was a 3/8 inch diameter, red tube taped to her neck. The tube went down her dangling arm. The blood pulsed from her body and into a pan under her. The spurts and drops of blood hitting the pan echoed off the cavern walls, pushing his terror to the edge of insanity. He hung there watching her life leave. Near the end, the drips came slowly. During the entire time, he never saw her conscious, but he knew that with her heart beating out blood, she had to have been alive. To stop the horror, Slick closed his eyes. It didn't help. He heard the crunch of footsteps quietly approaching him. He couldn't see who it was. He felt a pinch on his buttocks. Except for the intermittent pain of the restraints, he was becoming numb. In less than a minute, the pain was gone. He wanted to shake himself free, but his body wouldn't respond. He had lost motor control. His bowels had emptied, as had his bladder. Water flooded over his eyes, forcing him to close them. He was being washed again. There was an antiseptic hospital smell. His eyes crept open and would not shut. He heard the creaking of wood, and the squeak and rattle of a metal wheel to his left. The woman was being carefully lowered from the wooden frame into a wheelchair. Slick could see very little of the man other than the lower part of the pants underneath a white plastic apron and black, white-soled sneakers. Wide splashes of blood flowed down the apron, narrowed, gathered, and dripped from the bottom, splattering on his shoes. The man pushed the wheelchair past Slick. He watched it bounce over the rough surface, the limp body shaking more with each bump. Soon the hooded captor and the woman had moved just out of sight. Slick heard a deep grunt and then, with a slapping sound, the body fell onto something. His captor returned and turned Slick so that he could see the woman. "Good. Your eyes are open." It is crucial to watch the purification. The man pointed to a folding table. Slick strained to lift his head to see the man. Except for his eyes moving slightly, nothing else moved. All Slick could see were the man's dark pants and the apron, which stopped just below the man's knees. As Slick's vision focused, he saw a woman on a table. She was bathed in the dim, orange glow of the cavern. The man, who, in Slick's upside-down world, seemed to reach halfway to the ceiling, walked out of sight. When the man turned back towards Slick, the orange light lit his face for the first time. The misshapen face seemed to be hanging loosely on the skull. The eyes were ragged, deep, dark orange holes. The skin was severely scarred with deep folds. The man held a shiny object in his hand. It was a scalpel. Slick tried to close his eyes tightly. "No. It's no use. The muscles for your eyelids won't close now that the drug has taken effect. You must watch." "That's right. It is important to see the work of the Lord." As soon as his captor turned away, Slick focused his eyes to the right of the table. It was the barely audible silent slice of her skin that reached Slick first. Then the sound of deeper cuts through tough muscles and sinew followed. He knew that he would be next. Uncontrollable terror raged in his mind until it had filled every dark corner. He needed to escape. He commanded his body to move. He imagined it moving, but it did not move, could not move. The horror of the sounds and visions would not stop. He wanted to make himself die, to be able to flip the switch and cease to exist, but he was frozen in this world of frightful savagery. With his deepest fears terrorizing him, the slicing and cutting stopped. The soft crunch of footsteps moved toward him. The final coarse grind seemed inches away, but his fear and his upside-down world had distorted his senses. He knew someone was standing in front of him, but although mere inches away, he could not figure out what was happening. He was helpless, and the dread cinched his gut into an aching knot. The hamburger that he had so ravenously eaten and the Coke he had gulped, and most preciously, the Jack Daniels that had soothed his tortured soul, had left him in an acidic flood of sludge that spilled into his nose. He gagged, coughed, spit, and blew through his nose. He gagged again. "Oh, this won't do. Such filth. We'll need to clean you up. It would not do to start the purification with you in this condition." For the third time, Slick was washed, this time gently, reverently. For several minutes, Slick hung waiting for his fate. Then something at the border of his vision drew him. As it moved, he focused on it. Passing in front of his eyes was a long, clear tube. Then a shiny, thin metal passed by him. He refocused. It was the scalpel. He felt the cold metal on his neck. He thought he heard the scalpel cut. He felt stinging as his skin separated, and then he felt warmth. The warmth rolled down his cheek. He watched the first drops of his blood hit the pan. They made a dull ping. He felt pressure on his neck. He was swung slightly to the left and drifted back. The clear tube was taped to his neck, his forearm, and then the end was placed into the pan. His eyes focused on the end of the tube. With each pulse, his heart pumped blood rhythmically into the pan. He was watching himself die one heartbeat at a time. He didn't want to watch, but it is impossible not to look as his life disappeared into the distance. He wanted to let go, but the instinct to cling to life was too strong. He prayed for unconsciousness, but it didn't come quickly. Finally, as he weakened, his mind drifted. He was no longer conscious enough to fear dying. The pulsing blood no longer seemed like his. Death's inevitability had moved him beyond it. His mind fogged more and more, and then he was gone. Skinner dispassionately and proudly gazed down at his creations. Lines of blood ran down his plastic apron. Blood covered his forearms and dripped from his fingertips. He cocked his head to the side and smiled. He saw beauty in the savagery of his creations. To him, it was symbolically scriptural art. He cleaned himself and the bodies. He poured the blood and cornstarch into a large plastic jar. As he had done with the other two, he had removed and switched Anjanette and Slick's reproductive organs. He had deftly sewn up the incisions. He had been tender and caring as he had mutilated them. He was content, relaxed. He saw himself as the extension of God's will. It was perverse, but he believed it. Possessed by the strength of Paase, Skinner hoisted the two bodies onto a travois that he had constructed. He placed the large jar of blood mixture and paint brushes on it. He lifted it and dragged it toward a wall of the cavern. As he approached, the wall moaned, cracked, and opened a wide portal. He exited the cave into the darkness of the forest and dragged the bodies to his car. He folded the bodies, placed them reverently into the trunk, and in the moonless night, he headed to the Rainbow's End, an LGBTQ nightclub. Chapter 35. Petroglyphs and Winged Spiders. Lindy's sleep had been sound since she had been summoned to the cavern. Tonight she went to bed restless and anxious, and she could not pinpoint a reason. Her mind had been so clear for so long, but this night's sleep came grudgingly. She had just begun to drift away when the first bright orange light flashed across her eyes. Her eyes opened slightly and then she drifted away again. 2 consecutive bright orange flashes opened her eyes. She was staring up. Hovering close to the ceiling above Lindy was a small glowing petroglyph. It began to spin and grow. The motion mesmerized her. She felt her thoughts floating, disconnected as if her mind were an empty vessel waiting for a command. With each spin, another symbol emerged and attached itself to the edge of the center petroglyph. As it spun faster, more petroglyphs attached to it until it looked like a spinning galaxy of symbols. She calmly watched. It felt peaceful, soothing. It filled the ceiling, and with a flash of lightning the spinning symbols stopped. Then, like a giant claw, it collapsed around her bed. She sprang up to a sitting position. Her heart began to pound. The first bolt of lightning hit the headboard. She scurried away from it. She began to shake. Another bolt hit to her left, and another to her right. She swung away to avoid each. She curled into a fetal position. The fourth bolt hit her arm. Then in rapid fire, the bolts struck her body. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they thrashed her side to side. She shuddered, fearing the next strike. It came. The largest and most powerful bolt struck her in the chest. Uncontrollably, her arms flew open. The symbols vanished. Above her floated a dark, swirling cloud. A crimson drop fell from the cloud and struck Lindy on the forehead. She wiped it away with her left hand. It was warm. She looked at it. It was blood. As she gazed at it in the palm of her left hand, it began to spread. It wrapped around her palm, slid between her fingers, and wrapped around them. She couldn't move her arms to brush the blood away. Small bubbles began to appear. The first one burst and a small, winged, black spider crouched in the remnants of the bubble. She watched in horror as another burst and another winged spider appeared, and then another and another. The back of her hand was covered in tiny, wriggling, black winged dots. She felt a small prick like that of a needle. She felt another and another until her whole hand tingled. The spiders crawled over her hand, laying their silk strands. They wove in and out of each other until her hand was encased in a cocoon. The cocoon tightened. She could feel her hand being crushed. The pain exploded. Her mind filled with a vision. It was a parking lot. 2 faceless bodies lay on the ground. Their abdomens cut open. With bloody organs in each hand, a giant scar-faced Spooky straddled them. Red lights flashed. A police officer aimed his gun at Spooky. He fired. She bolted awake, breathing heavily. "Nightmare," she muttered. As she breathed a sigh of relief, she noticed that the back of her hand felt tender. She raised it and looked. Tiny red dots covered it. Visions of the nightmare flashed. She trembled. Uncontrollably, she watched as the dots stretched, cutting into her skin. Razor-thin line by razor-thin line, they twisted and turned and formed shapes. Like the orange spiders, it was another message from Topilo, EUM protege. The vision of the scene in the parking lot returned, this time more vivid. A neon sign flashed, "The Rainbow's End." Immediately she rose, dressed, and left. Stuart Garson was a rookie cop just completing his probation period. At 25, he was one of the younger cops on the force. He was bright, eager, and a college graduate, and he had plans to be a homicide detective. He was paying his dues with the midnight and early patrol hours. Nothing of note had happened until he turned left off Melrose Avenue onto Pike Street. As he approached the alley next to the Rainbow's End nightclub, he noticed a car in the parking lot adjacent to the alley. At this time in the wee hours of the morning, that was unusual. He slowed as he passed the nightclub. The trunk to the car was open. He slowed more. When he was just past the alley, he looked in the rearview mirror. He hit the brakes. Standing in the dark in front of the alley wall of the nightclub was a man painting on the wall. He put the car into reverse, and then pulled forward into the alley. He turned on the car's spotlight, and shined it on the man. The man didn't budge, he just kept painting. Stuart gave the siren a quick punch. The man kept painting. He got out of the car, and with his hand on his gun, he approached. He identified himself as Seattle Police Department. The man kept painting. Stuart yelled for the man to get on the ground as a set of headlights flashed across the parking lot. Stuart turned slightly, trying to keep an eye on the painter while trying to see who was approaching. He heard a car door shut. "So, what have we got going on here?" Detective Martin asked. Stuart backed up and turned to see who it was. "Detective Martin?" "Yes. That's what they call me." "It's Garson, Detective." "So, what is this?" "I caught this guy painting on the wall." "So, it's just graffiti?" "Yeah, but he's not responding." Stuart's head suddenly twisted to the right. He squinted and peered into the dark. He quickly pulled his gun and yelled, "Get down now! On your belly! Now!" The man leisurely turned. He slowly walked forward. "Stop!" Garson sternly ordered. "What are you doing?" "Waiting for you to die," the man said coldly. The man stepped under the parking lot light. Stuart jerked his head back, his eyes widened. His body shuddered. The man's eyes were sunken so deeply that only black holes could be seen. The skin around the eyes was stretched, misshapen holes with several small slices of skin missing. The forehead was deeply wrinkled with ragged short cuts. From temple to temple, open jagged slices crossed the bridge of the nose. A mottled, flaking crust covered the entire face. Soft black fuzz hung from many of the cuts. The nostrils were large irregular holes. The nose was shriveled and bent up severely. The chin was twisted and folded slightly to the side. Stuart's gun shook. From the police artist's rendering and description, Stuart knew who it was: Spooky. He stepped back and shouted, "Stop or I'll fire!" Martin stepped to the side of the officer. "Drop the gun, Garson!" He turned his head to her. Her gun was 3 feet from him, pointed at his head. Startled and confused, he responded, "What? This is Spooky. This is the killer. This is the guy who mutilated those people. I said drop the gun now." Stuart gently laid the gun down. "Back away." Martin picked up the gun. "Now get on your knees and put your hands behind your back." A confused Garson silently complied. Spooky cocked his head to one side, and with a strident, raspy voice demanded, "He needs to die." "No!" Martin glared hard at Skinner. Skinner jutted his head at her. His eyes flared as they moved into the headlights. Martin stumbled backwards. Laying a short distance from them were 2 long mounds. Skinner rushed at her. Martin staggered back. Garson cringed and fell on his side. Staring at Martin, Skinner reached out his left hand to Garson. Garson pushed himself away. Skinner extended the hand again. Garson swiped at it. Skinner snapped his hand around Garson's wrist. Skinner tightened his grasp on Garson's wrist and yanked Garson to his knees. Skinner cocked his head to the side again and froze. Skinner reached into his pocket with his right hand and pulled out a 6-inch long, 2-inch wide, 3/4-inch thick black rectangular object. He pushed down on the top of it. A silver blade flashed at the end of the handle. Skinner's arm swept across. Red sprayed. Skinner held tightly to Garson's wrist as he watched the spurt of blood turn into a flow. With a taut, evil chuckle, Skinner slowly turned his head toward Martin. For a few moments she just stared. Then she suddenly jerked herself away and locked onto Spooky's eyes. "Why?" she pleaded. "Why? You know why. What did you think was going to happen if someone found out about us?" It was the "about us" that drove a spike into her soul. She was a part of this, a part of 5 murders. That someone else was pulling the strings didn't ease her conscience. And this time she was present, and it was a policeman, and worst of all, she knew him and his family. Garson's father had been a cop, an honest cop who sacrificed his life to save a 5-year-old. He had pulled the child from a blazing car wreck. He had suffered for weeks from extensive burns before he died. "Well?" Spooky prodded. "Fuck you. Is that any way to treat your master?" He smirked. Martin desperately wanted to pull the trigger and emptied the clip into his forehead. The feeling was so strong that this time she knew she could find the willpower. She raised her 9mm Glock and drew a bead between his eyes. Her mind said that she was squeezing the trigger. She felt the muscles tighten, but her finger didn't move. She looked up and howled her grief and hate at the night sky. Spooky struck her cheek hard with the back of his hand. The howling stopped. She fell. He stood over her, knelt on one knee, and punched her nose. Tears filled her eyes. Try as she might, she couldn't raise a hand to defend herself. He grabbed a handful of hair just above her forehead. He jutted his head at her and growled. "This is what you are going to tell them. Spooky called you and told you where he would dump the bodies. When you drove up, Garson was on his knees. Spooky looked at you and sliced Garson's throat. Then Spooky rushed at your car. You tried to get out of the car, but Spooky kicked your door, and your arm got pinned in the door." He took the butt of his knife and slammed it on her forearm. She grimaced and yelled. He chuckled and smiled. "Then he pulled you out of the car and shouted abomination at you. He hit you several times and then knocked you out. That's your story. Got it?" Seething silently, she stared at him. He gripped her hair tightly, raised her head a few inches, and slammed it onto the pavement. She jerked twice. Her eyes rolled back as they closed. She lay still. He calmly walked back to the wall and finished painting the message. He packed up, walked over to Lindy, and checked her neck for a pulse. "You'll live. I would truly like to squeeze the life out of you, but I need you a little while longer." Skinner was pleased. He held life and death, the ultimate power, in his hands. He glanced down at her and walked away with a satisfied soft laugh. Chapter 36. Burned in their lusts. "We've got 3 more," the man on the phone announced. "And good morning to you too, Detective Wright. I assume we're skipping the courteous phone salutation that civilized people use. You remember them. It goes something like this: 'Good morning, sorry to wake you so damn early, but this is urgent.'" Parker needled. "It is urgent, isn't it?" Detective Wright replied. "Number 1, it's not a good morning, at least not for the 2 stiffs in front of me and another nearby, Stuart Garson, a young patrol officer. You never met him. Good kid. Number 2, I've been up for, let me see, an hour so far, so I only have sympathy for Garson. For everyone else, including 2 of the stiffs, I've got none. Number 3, if you want sympathy, buy yourself a Hallmark card. Would you like me to go on? I don't think that will be necessary. Good. You need to get your ass over to the Rainbows End nightclub. We've got a couple of gutted ones, and they're not getting any fresher. And by the way, I wouldn't stop for breakfast if I were you. Melinda just got there, and she says that it's better to arrive on an empty stomach. That bad, huh? Yeah. It looks like a butcher shop had a sale on 2 sides of beef. Even Melinda cringed. By the way, have you had a chance to look over the case files I gave you? Case files? Yes, the files on Spooky's first murder. I don't. Don't tell me that you've forgotten. Remind me. It's early, and I'm still a bit foggy. At breakfast yesterday, I met you and gave you a flash drive, a black flash drive. I even put it in a little pouch so you wouldn't lose it. I dropped it right in front of you. I thought you were going to jump out of your skin. Then we talked about the case for a little while, and I left. You don't remember that? Oh yeah? I remember that, now. I'm just a little groggy. I didn't sleep well last night. Well, did you look at it? I haven't had a chance, but I'll get to it. I'll see you in a few minutes, unless you forget I called. Sure, I'll be there shortly. Parker rose and frantically searched for the flash drive. It took only a minute to find it in his suit coat's inside pocket. At one end of the flash drive was a hole. Parker rung off, set his cell phone on the nightstand next to the bed, sat up, turned, and sat on the edge of the bed. This is ridiculous. I know I saw a talon, not some damn flash drive. But Susan saw right. Hell, I saw right, but I saw the shaman. I know I did. However, there were those several blows to his head. Crazy dreams. Lightheadedness. Dizziness. Illusions? Now there was no talon, no totem pole coming to life, and no colus. He touched his chest to confirm that the talon scar was part of some bizarre waking nightmare. There was a bump. He traced it with his finger. It was a talon-shaped scar. He felt a warm rush climb up his body, and then the trembling started. He was losing his grip. His world had become caught somewhere between reality and the surreal. His hold on his mind felt tenuous. He had to gather what was left of his sanity and nail it down. He needed to appear to be sane. He had to ignore the doubt. Now, as the two worlds spilled into each other, either world felt real. He left with his mind swirling around itself. Parker called Agent Simpson and relayed Wright's message. They met at the car and Parker drove to the new crime scene. Considering the side trips that his mind had been taking, he wasn't surprised that the poem had entered his mind. The sight was not so fair as one or two that I have seen elsewhere. It was strange to have the line from E. A. Robinson's poem, "How Annandale Went Out," surface, but that's what happened when he first gazed at the newest victims. He had already seen one or two of spooky sights elsewhere, and this one was equally horrific. Melinda and her crew had been working feverishly on the crime scene for nearly an hour. After seeing Spooky's previous displays of gore, Parker hadn't expected to be struck so hard, but he was hit even harder. It wasn't so much the sight as it was knowing the sheer terror that Spooky's victims had to endure. This time, when he stood next to the bodies, he began involuntarily reliving their last minutes. They had to have endured unimaginable terror, as they watched their own bodies being drained of blood drop by drop, second by second. Seeing but being unable to do anything to stop it. He locked onto the woman's vacant eyes. "We have got to get this fucking monster, soon." Then he mumbled to himself. "You fucking depraved, degenerate son of a bitch. Don't plan on any jail time. I see a warning shot right between the eyes and a shallow grave in the woods in your future." "What did you say?" Agent Simpson asked. "Just planning this man's future," Parker answered. "What?" Agent Simpson inquired. "Nothing. I'm just mumbling to myself." The voice came from Parker's left. "Are you conscious yet?" Wright asked. "Yeah, I'm fine." "So, what's your assessment, other than that he's a fucking monster?" Detective Wright asked. "My assessment? He's a strong argument for legalized abortion no matter what the trimester is." "Wasn't his first murder a statement about that?" Agent Simpson asked. "Yeah." "So, were there any witnesses this time, right?" Parker asked. "Are you ready for this?" "I hope so." "There was one, and you won't believe who it was." Wright nodded his head toward the paramedic truck. In the open rear door of the truck sat a woman with a blanket over her shoulders, and her head buried in her hands. "Holy crap. Is that Lindy? You can't be serious." "Serious as 3 dead bodies in a parking lot. It's a shame about young Patrolman Garson," Parker said, pulling his thoughts away from Lindy. "Yeah, he got his throat slashed. Nearly took his head off." Wright responded. "So Garson caught Spooky in the act?" Agent Simpson asked. "Looks like that. He got his gun out, but he never got a shot off. He's over there." He pointed to a dark hump. Parker looked over at Martin, who was still sitting with her head cradled in her hands and a blanket draped over her shoulders. His heart sank. No matter what animosity he felt from her, seeing her like this distressed him. While she had destroyed much of what they once had together, he still felt something for her. He wasn't quite sure what it was, but it was enough to push him toward her. Martin didn't lift her head until Parker spoke. "Lindy." She looked up. What he saw next was pitiable. The anger that Parker had assumed had been simmering in her over the past 6 years seemed to be either hidden or gone. All he could see was a tortured soul in need. He gently said, "I understand that you saw what happened." She meekly replied, "Yes," and looked across the lot at the 3 bodies. Her head dropped, and Parker thought he heard something he had never heard before. She was crying. It was quiet and indistinct. "Are you going to be okay?" "No," she said despondently. In their time together, Parker had seen Lindy happy, disgusted, frightened, surprised, and too many times very angry, but never had he seen her despondent. Yet that's what he sensed from her, and for the first time, he found himself worried about something other than her anger. "I'm sorry. I wish that this hadn't happened to you," he said softly. She didn't respond. She just kept looking at the pavement. "Lindy, I hate to bother you, but you know the routine. You need to tell me what happened here. What you saw." "I wanted to stop him, but I... To stop who?" Martin looked up at Parker. S.K. She desperately wanted to tell him that Spooky was really Skinner, but while the name Skinner was blaring in her head, what came out was Spooky. "I couldn't stop him. I wanted to, but I couldn't." It took another 5 minutes before Lindy pulled herself out enough from the depths of despair to tell Parker what had happened. When she was finally able to, the tale she told was the only one that Topilo would allow her to tell. The real, whole truth just wouldn't come out. "Why didn't Spooky kill you?" Parker asked. "What? Why did he kill Garson but not you?" I... Lindy had no immediate answer. She sat staring at Parker for several seconds, searching for the answer that Spooky had given her. Slowly she forced it out. "I was to deliver a message to you. Looks to me as if he painted that very clearly on the wall," he said. "Abomination?" "That's it." "One word." "Yes, that's all." "Why? What did you expect me to do?" She began to tremble. "I couldn't stop him. I just couldn't." "What the hell do you want from me?" Then she broke away from his gaze, put her head down, and sobbed. Parker stood for a moment looking down at her. He wanted to say something comforting but couldn't think of anything that would help, so he silently left Martin with her head down, a forlorn expression, and tears dripping from her chin. He could feel her despair, and it bothered him, but he also knew that he was not the one who could bring her comfort. She would never allow that. As he turned away from her, he saw Melinda feverishly spraying the wall. She was revealing the final part of the same bloody biblical message. "So, what do we have so far, Melinda?" Parker asked as he walked up beside her. "Another bloody message. 2 drained bodies, 1 male, 1 female, and Garson. Other than that, it's too dark to tell much of anything until we set up the floodlights." "So they were dead before he cut them open?" Parker asked. Melinda jerked back in astonishment. "Of course. You mean you thought they were still alive? This is Spooky that we're talking about. After what he did to Father O'Donovan, I wouldn't put anything past him. Fortunately, they were dead." She paused, thought for a moment, and said, "I can't believe that I just said that. Not very nice, is it?" Parker shrugged and took a step back. "Was it the same passages that were painted on the wall at the Lambda Zone?" Wright and Simpson walked up as Parker began to read the Latin to confirm they were the same passages. "Propterea tradidit illos Deus. He sure likes his Vulgate Latin Bible, doesn't he?" Agent Simpson said as she stood next to Parker. How did you know it was from the Vulgate Bible? Remember me. I'm the one who thoroughly reads the police reports while you are doing the heavy thinking. How about an English translation for us illiterates? Wright asked. The English translation had been rolling around in Parker's mind so often that he had it memorized. For this cause, God delivered them up to shameful affections. For their women have changed the natural use into that use which is against nature. And in like manner, the men also, leaving the natural use of the women, have burned in their lusts one towards another, men with men working that which is filthy, and receiving in themselves the recompense which was due to their error. Very well done, Wright said. So, basically, it's saying, don't be a homosexual because God doesn't like it. Not a very open-minded God. But since he's God, he can say what he wants, I guess. Men write the Bible. God doesn't, Parker replied. I doubt God had this punishment in mind, Agent Simpson said. Anyway, we're just bunning up the scene. Give me until noon to get the preliminaries on the deaths. No sooner than that? Parker asked. Melinda looked over her shoulder and harshly frowned at Parker. Parker mockingly cringed. Noon it is. Parker didn't know Garson and barely knew his father, but the sight hit him hard. Garson's body was grotesquely contorted. He was on his knees. His body was slumped forward with his forehead pressed against the pavement. The slice in his throat was so deep his neck had arched down and bent nearly 90 degrees in the middle. The severe angle had opened the cut wide. It was obvious that he had bled out quickly. His body was in the center of a large pool of blood that went from just above his head to his feet. His eyelids were open, and the blood had flowed into his eyes and had begun to crust over. His mouth was open, and his chin touched the blood on the pavement. His arms were stretched out in front of his head with his forearms on the pavement, and the palms of his hands pressed against each other. He rested, perfectly balanced in reverent prayer, bloody, reverent prayer. Parker silently stared at Spooky's sculpture, a balanced contortion kneeling in supplication in front of the obviously biblical message on the wall. Clearly, the body had been posed for effect. By precisely arranging this prayerful figure begging for forgiveness, Spooky was not just delivering God's message, he was roaring God's wrath. This was obvious to Parker. But why had Lindy been told to deliver the abomination message to Parker? Was this grotesque sight another part of that message? Had this scene been staged for him? Had Spooky made this personal? Why the hell me? No. Impossible, he quietly argued with himself. It has to be more than that. He rationalized that it had to be a symbolic representation of the need for all of humankind to plead for forgiveness. Garson had merely been in the wrong place at the right time for Spooky to shout his statement.